We're good to go with the recording. Perfect. So thank you guys so much for coming today to a very, very special SPJ event. As you all know, we have a very important guest with us, Kevin Negandhi from ESPN. He works on SportsCenter, works on college football on the weekends. If you're tuning into ABC, you'll see him at halftime, pregame, postgame, all of that great coverage. He was on SportsCenter earlier tonight. I don't think I need to give more of an intro because I'm pretty sure you all know who he is and you're excited to kind of just hear from him. So Kevin, I'll open it up with a question for you. How did you get into sports broadcasting and sports media?
I was very lucky at an age, very young age of 14, where I realized this was one of those dreams that I had. And originally started looking at schools with the idea of, the Syracuses, the Northwesterns of the world, and, created this long list. And being a Philadelphia kid, I wanted to go as far away as possible from home. And so it was down to USC in Syracuse, and I picked Syracuse. I didn't think I was going to study at USC. Turns out I didn't study at Syracuse. So I lasted a semester there. I knew I wasn't going to get an opportunity where I wanted to do something kind of by my freshman and sophomore year. And I felt like there's so many people in front of me, and I wanted to go to a big market. So going to Temple was probably the best decision of my career because of market force. So, by the time I'm 19 years old, transferring to Temple, I'm in the booth with Harry Kalas during Phillies games. At 20, I'm, working at the Temple radio station, doing play-by-play for 3 years for the women's basketball team and traveling with them. I'm writing for the Temple News. I'm on the air for Temple Update, our TV station. I'm at the Allen Iverson crossover game against Jordan because I worked at Temple Radio, which had a 50,000 watt radio station. So it allowed me to have access to all the pro sports. So for me, it was just getting as much experience as possible on the college level, 5 internships. And so I was heavily involved in every layer at Temple to make sure I got experience on my resume by the time I graduated, and getting a strong tape on camera, and that with internships. And then that eventually got me into my first job. And then that led to my first live job on the set doing local sports in Missouri, in a small market. And that led to the next job in Florida. And then eventually that led to a job at ESPN. So there are a lot of layers to this. It's not like one step, 2 steps. There are multiple layers of understanding what works for me and what I wanted to do, and gaining experience. I have told Tara, many people this, and I think I've told you this too, like in college, maximize the experience as much as possible. Internships and the TV station on campus, the radio station, do as many things as possible, because you won't get that opportunity once you leave. You won't get that chance again. So in that 4.5 year frame that you can try and maximize it, do it, and ask as many questions, gain the experience, learn how to do every single thing, because you'll need to lean on that in your first 2 to 3 jobs.
And, I have a handful of questions for you, Kevin. If anybody else has a question, please flag me down in some sort of way. As I mentioned, smoke signals are effective as well. So Kevin, you talk about how you go to Temple, you get into local sports, and then eventually get to ESPN. What was that process like? I know in this room right now, we have some seniors who are graduating in December or in May. We have a lot of juniors as well. So talk about that process of, finally making it up to ESPN.
So to anybody out there in this business, if you pull anybody on the air at ESPN and ask them their story, our stories won't be the same. There's no one that had a simple, I just did this and that led to this and that led to this and that's how I got on the air. None of that. And I've spoken about this on a handful of occasions to broadcasting classes as well as graduating classes. Don't ever think that if I do A, that gets me to B, that gets me to C, and eventually I'll go down the line, I'll get to Z, which is my end goal. It's not like that. There's going to be encounters where you'll go to A to B to H, back to D, back to A again, resetting and trying to figure things out, make the jump to R, and then go backwards to K, and then eventually you'll get to Z. The whole point of me explaining that is we all have different journeys and different paths. Like, for example, for me, uh, when I got out of school, I thought I had a phenomenal tape, and it was a lot of good stuff. I had applied to 50 TV stations around the country, and all I heard was no, 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 no. And the reason why I heard no is maybe I wasn't ready for that market. Maybe that market did an internal candidate. Maybe that market was already filled. Like, it's nothing personal. It's very subjective. Whether you feel like you've got a great tape doesn't mean you have a great tape for that news director looking for a certain look. So keep all those factors in mind. My second job was in Missouri. That led to my third job in Florida. And I actually got out of TV for a year, and I thought, hey, I'm done. I was done by the time I was 27, 28 years old. And then I took a year off because I had to take care of some personal things. And my old TV station called me back, and some things were straightened out. And I went back into it, not thinking about ESPN anymore. Now it's just like, just do it because I love what I do. And 2 years later, I got the call at ESPN. So for a tryout. So I say that to you guys because understand that there's nothing easy about this process. There's nothing like, well, look at that person. Look at how they did it. I want to do it like them. You're not going to get anything that's going to be duplicate. You've got to create your own path that makes sense for you and finding your way, and understand that many of the people that I went to school with and I graduated with, they lasted 3 to 5 years and they were out of the business. Two of my closest friends, one guy sells mortgages and the other one went into pharmaceutical sales. And those are the two guys that I looked upon like, yeah, they're going to make it. They're going to be pretty darn good. So I bring that up not to discourage you. I bring that up so you guys understand that it is a grind, especially in your 20s and 30s, to find a place where you're like, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do. When you get there, savor the moment, but also understand there's a lot more in front of you. When I got to ESPN in 2006, I told my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, that, okay, now I feel like I climbed Mount Everest and I'm at the top, but holy cow, I've got to figure out what else am I going to do next. And that next thing was not falling down the mountain, because people are still coming up for that job. And I've got to make sure that I get better and I stay sharp, because if I'm not sharp, I'm gone. So you're always on your toes. 14 years later, I still feel the same way. There are people that want the stuff that I do on SportsCenter and college football on ABC. I've got to be aware of that, and I got to maintain. It's very much like your starting quarterback, right? They draft another guy, and that guy's waiting in the wings. And if you screw up, perfect example of the team I'm watching tonight, my hometown team, Carson Wentz 3 years ago was on top of the world. And the minute you start slipping up and you can't consistently do your job, somebody else is right there. So the journey is about doing the things you want, finding the things you like that you're good at, also challenging yourself on your weaknesses, but at the same time, day in and day out, be consistently good at something.
And something I think that we're all kind of wondering about, a lot of us work on the student television station or the radio station or the newspaper, or one of the other different activities that we have at the college. We actually have our manager of television and radio operations here. So when you drive to work every day, what do you do in preparation for a show? What do you do when you get there? How does it all kind of come together? What's the schedule like?
Good question. So when I'm driving into work, I may be on the phone, calling somebody, in the business, getting some information on a topic that's heavily on my mind. We're really lucky that we work with a lot of smart insiders. I also sometimes tap into podcasts like ESPN Daily, with Pablo Torre is really good. He'll give you some information that's going on, or I'll just listen to the shows on that are going on currently on ESPN programming on my Sirius XM and just hear what they're saying. And sometimes it's, you know, an NBA related show. Sometimes it's a first take. Sometimes it's, you know, NFL Live. Sometimes it's dominated by a certain subject. And I'll kind of get some information that way. I get in, producer comes over, visits me, tells me about the rundown because we've already had a pre-show meeting at noon. And I'll start writing, you know, and looking up stories and using the internet, of course, and going on Twitter and searching on Twitter if there's anything that's developing. And also just, you know, when it comes to interviews, segment producers are putting stuff together, but I'll go in and rewrite the whole segment in my voice, what I'm most comfortable saying, something that I can own. I write everything I say on the air because it's in my voice. It's my identity. There oftentimes another anchor's copy will come into my stuff and I can't read the way they read. I can't read the way they wrote this because they're writing it in their own voice in their head. I write it in the voice of my head. And with that, I'm staying true to myself. Like I say this to everybody, Tara, that's listening right now. When you get somewhere, don't try to be somebody else but you, because eventually you will stand out. If you try to act like I'm going to be a broadcaster and this is how I'm going to talk all the time, eventually you can't hold that charade, right? You've got to figure it out and what you're most comfortable in your own skin. So from the start, I've always just said, be myself and find the moments where you can continue to have fun, write in a tone that you feel like is your voice. And so I'll write up until 5:30, and we'll see if we have any scheduled interviews that we have pre-tapings for. And I grab a bite to eat, and then I head over into the studio. And usually that's around 5:30, 5:45, and that could be me interviewing Dan Orlovsky early for an early segment, or Marcus Spears, or you know, Marcus and Ryan together, or Stephen A. Smith, or Woj, or Shefty, doing something ahead of time. That could be me like interviewing an athlete beforehand where we get our schedules together. A couple months ago was me interviewing Jamie Foxx at 5:15, you know, and then that interview aired a little bit later on. So you're constantly adjusting to a schedule that's never set. I mean, literally never set. And then the minute you feel like it's set, that's the minute things are going to go get flipped upside down on the 6 o'clock show because we have breaking news constantly.
Well, thank you for that, Kevin. Definitely lots of breaking news at the 6 o'clock hour. Does anybody have a question? I could ask a million questions. Michael, let's go to you, Mike Memis.
So I grew up and I remember you on SportsCenter AM, although now you are at 6 p.m. So could you describe the difference between doing a show in the AM when it's people going to work, or maybe they're just at work, compared to 6 p.m. when people are just getting home and, you know, from their 9 to 5s and, you know, having dinner or whatever they're doing when they get home?
Michael, that's a great question. I actually was on a podcast earlier today describing, you know, maybe that's the biggest challenge at SportsCenter for me early on. And that was, you know, I did the 11 p.m., you know, with the great Scott Van Pelt and Steve Levy and, you know, John Anderson and Butchergross and those guys, to suddenly the morning show with Hannah Storm and Josh Elliott, and you're switching, or you're wearing multiple hats, right? So I had to understand that the 11 p.m. SportsCenter is a highlight-driven show with some hard news, but really dominant with highlights because you're doing a reaction to what we just saw. The morning shows, which I did 5 years with Hannah, and then 3 years later, 3 years after with Hannah, I did a whole bunch of stuff with Jay Harris and Randy Scott and Jamie Sire. We did our own show too. That was reaction from what we saw overnight to post game to more in-depth interviews. Now the 6 p.m. show is about kind of a pregame show, reacting to news all day. And then sometimes we had highlights, which I love doing. I like the mix of everything, right? And sometimes we would have highlights when we had the NBA bubble, we had Major League Baseball in the playoffs. So we would react to that. So each show is a different audience, and each show is a different mentality. So, you know, in a highlight show, you're let's go, let's react, let's go, right? You'll see that probably tonight after Van Pelt. Boom, 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 boom. Let's go. The 6 p.m. today is, hey, this is what's going on in the NFL right now surrounding the Ravens. This is the preparation before Eagles Seahawks tonight. And what's wrong with Carson Wentz, and how are the Seahawks, 5-0 at the link in the last 20 some years? Like, so you're doing more of a, hey, let's set everything up with information. The morning show is, hey, this is what happened last night. This is the post game. Let's go talk to the analysts and break it down. And then sometimes we'll have an occasional interview with a guest. So each one is a completely different theme, and your job is to find your own voice and what works in all of them and adapt. Everything we do in this business is adapt. None of us are 9-to-5 people. If we were, we'd be doing 9-to-5 jobs, right? We are all different. We are wired different. That's why we got into this business. And understand that the joy and the great thing about what we do in this business is every single day it's something new. But that means every single day we have to adapt and be aware that it's going to be a fluid situation, and that all these great things I have can get thrown out the door if we've got breaking news. And, the Ravens have to call the game against the Steelers tomorrow because they're going to go on a strike because the players are upset. Everything we just did, throw it out the door. Or, perfect example, draft night. Just a couple weeks ago for the NBA. Sixers just traded Al Horford. Boom, that changed everything on what we were doing with Woj and I. Literally, I had something set up and throw it out the door. All the stuff that you put in, adapt to what's going on. So I think, Michael, to your original question, certain shows you are set in stone. Other shows I'm adapting. And the 11 p.m. is constantly adapting, because if we have a better game suddenly, or a no-hitter, that game's going to the top and everything else gets moved around. So just be open to being fluid, adaptable, and making sure that you're not attached to anything.
Awesome. Caden, do you have a question?
Yeah.
Caden, you can go then. John Vicari.
Okay. Hi, Mr. Negandhi. I actually have a two-part question. So first off, you kind of touched up on this, but what were your goals entering the workforce after graduating from college? So for instance, did you just kind of take the first job you could get, or did you have a certain plan or a set of expectations for yourself?
Okay. So Caden, you did one thing wrong and one thing right. And this is for everybody in here. Never, ever, ever interview somebody and say it's a two-part question, or I have two questions, because in reality, that first question will never get answered if you ask the second question. Thankfully, you stopped on the first question, right? So understand that you'll get the second chance. I say this all the time. We were taught this actually at ESPN when we would hear news conferences. Never raise your hand and say, yeah, I've got two questions, because I can tell you the subject will always go to the last question they hear, not the first question. So in reality, you only have one question. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. No. And I'm not trying to use you as an example. It's just to help you guys down the road. Never ask a two-part question. Ask always a one-part question and then jump in and do a follow-up, right? So the question was, what were my goals when I got into the business? Would I take any job? There were a couple of opportunities where, when you get rejected by 50 TV stations and you're like, I want a job. I actually had an offer from a place in Kennewick, Washington, decent market. They wanted me to be the weatherman for 3 days and the sports anchor on the weekends. And one of my mentors at the time, where I did an internship at a TV station in Philadelphia, I told them, I was like, I think I'm going to take this job. And my mentor sat me down and goes, why do you think you're going to take the job? I said, because I need to get a job. I need to say yes. Like, I'm chomping at the bit. I need to go. I'll figure it out. He goes, have you ever done weather? I said, no. I'll find a way on a green screen. This is that. This is this, and this is that. I just need to get on tape. Like something, I need to find a way to get these reps. And he goes, do you think you're going to succeed in this business as a sports guy? Do you want to be a sports anchor? And I said, yeah. He goes, then don't take the job that's going to have you do weather for 3 days. And I said, okay. He goes, at a certain point, I get that you want to do anything and everything, but you've got to believe in yourself that you're going to get a job. And he was right, but it was really tough for me to say I'm going to pass. And then within 2 weeks, I got 3 job offers. So it's a very strange world here in sorting that stuff out because there's so much unknown. I was willing to do anything and everything, but eventually he was right. I needed to be on the air 5 days a week as a sports reporter and a sports anchor, learning the craft instead of doing it 3 days a week and then doing sports on the weekends, because I wasn't going to get better every day. The best thing about that first job is reps. You need reps, reps, and more reps. And the best thing that you guys have in the college experience is reps. I mean, I would, anytime you guys can get on the air to do something or that's related to sports, get on the air and do it, because that's how you're going to learn your voice. That's how you're going to learn deadline. That's how you're going to learn what works this time, what doesn't work that time. That's how you're going to learn, hey, I made a mistake here. I'm not going to do this the next time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Did I answer the second question too, or the first one?
Pretty much. I mean, my second question was, what were some of your biggest like letdowns and how'd you overcome them? And you sort of.
Good question. My some of my biggest letdowns have been really me just not being forgiving, man. Like there was one night I did a show in my first job, and it was like my first month in. I wrote something wrong on the graphic. There was like some Colts game, and I named the dome the wrong name. And I remember driving home, and I lived an hour away because I worked in the satellite station as the reporter, sports reporter, and then the weekends I worked in the main TV station as the sports guy. I remember driving home in the middle of nowhere between Missouri and Iowa, thinking that, boy, I'm going to get fired because of this. And it was the dumbest reason to think I was going to get fired. So my biggest letdown sometimes have been myself, where I feel like I'm letting myself down and I make something much bigger than it really is. And in the reality of it, it's not that big of a deal. And I had to learn through a lot of mistakes and eventually at ESPN through a couple of mentors who said, hey, you got to forgive yourself, man. There was one show I did, and there was a great guy named Jerry Madelon, who's not at ESPN anymore, but he helped discover Stuart Scott, and he's a close confidant of mine, and he mentors a lot of professional athletes and TV people now. I remember calling him a few years ago, and I said I had a really, really bad show the night before, and I shouldn't have said this, and here's why, and I'm processing this whole thing. And you know, the funny thing that he did, and he's actually done this now for other people and used me as an example, he found a fake obituary, and he put my picture of me on there, and he wrote this whole thing of the whole conversation I had on how I screwed up and all that. And he sent it to me, and I read it, and I just started dying. And he was just like, Kev, you didn't die. So stop acting like this is the end all be all. You made a mistake on TV. Everybody makes a mistake. You've got to forgive yourself. The most important thing is you've got to move on. You give yourself that moment where you're upset, mad, but at the same time, you got to move on. And he nailed it. And looking back, it was foolish and dumb. But at the time, you guys are in the business. You guys know, or you guys are grinding it out, trying to figure out what makes sense. You are so self-critical because that's who we are. I'm still critical about certain things, but I've had to learn to let it go. I can't do anything about it. And like Chris Berman has said many times to me and many people, it's on its way to Pluto. You can't get it back. You made a mistake. You move on. You find a way to get better the next time.
Thank you, Kevin. Let's go to John Vicari, and then we'll go to Dane Richardson. I'm trying to get as many questions as possible.
Thanks, Kevin, for joining us here tonight. You talked a lot about adaptability and expectations in that last question. I think mine sort of encapsulates both. You were recently moved to the 6 p.m. SportsCenter, which is obviously a high-profile job, and it's a bit different creatively than the prior edition of SportsCenter. And you had to work with a co-host I don't think you previously worked with. So my question is, how do you build chemistry with a new co-host and both in agreement come to an expectation that you have to hit because it is one of ESPN's biggest properties?
Well, that's a really, really smart question. And if you're referring to Sage and I actually worked together. We knew each other back in our days in Florida, 15, 20 years ago. And early on when Sage was hired, she worked on ESPN News. I was already there about a year in. So we had some time working with each other. But at the same time, the one viewpoint that you brought up is creativity on the 6 p.m. is you have 1 hour. You're not doing like a 35 to 40-second lead in. That's, let's do this graphic, that graphic. You're like, give me the hard news, what works, what's going to go on. So for me, finding the creativity was layered in interviews. It's layered in how I'm reading a news video, a VO, and I'm giving you hard news, but how I'm reading it. Creativity is how I'm doing an interview with Stephen A. Smith and having fun with them, and there's a back and forth, or when Ryan Clark and Marcus Spears and I are together, or Dan Orlovsky and I are together, or Tim Legler. You find those moments where you could still be creative because you're asking a question that may come across as basic and generic, but you're putting your own flavor to it, your own signature with it. Working with Sage, it's like working with every anchor. Like, you find out what works together, what they like, what they don't like, and then it's you're doing a collaborative effort. Hopefully you're doing a collaborative effort. You need to find that way. I mean, I go back to my first years with Hannah Storm. She's a legend. I'm working with a legend next to me. How do I make sure I'm holding my own? And she made me better. And then there's certain times where I felt like I'm rising, and then I'm here with her. And whenever Hannah and I have worked a variety of shows over the years where we haven't worked together for 6 to 8 months, and then boom, it's the magic and the chemistry is right there like it was before. And that's just because it's 5 years of the daily grind, in and out. So to me, it's kind of very much like a relationship that you would have with one of your friends. Their strengths, their weaknesses, how a conversation can go. From my job is to find a way to flow into that conversation while still delivering, on the air, and then come back to, hey, we can still, go back and forth. Whenever we have somebody new too, you're not throwing out a lot of stuff. You're making sure, when I work with Stuart Scott, it's Stuart Scott's show. I'm on there just to not screw up. And I was aware of that. And the whole night I went in, I was like, just don't screw it up. Just understand Stuart's doing his thing and find your way. Stuart on the show was phenomenal with me because he actually understood, I'm going to make sure Kevin's set up. The great ones understand that. And, when I've done shows with guys that are beyond talented and you're just sitting there and all, you learn that, hey, it's not about them. It's about us together. And that now 14 years at ESPN, I'm aware that if we have somebody new, it's not about me, it's about us. And let's find this back and forth together. And I'm going to make sure you are set up to succeed. And that's kind of the concept of doing a show with another person. Make sure that they're set up to succeed as well. You're putting them in good spots.
All righty. Great question. Great answer. Dane Richardson, over to you.
Yeah, you kind of just talked about creativity. So at your level, how do you approach really adding a new element sort of to your broadcasting, not giving viewers continuity to make yourself better? And do you go back and watch yourself a lot on different SportsCenter shows?
Two really good observations. Number one, I'll say one of my mentors, who was the best local sportscaster I've ever seen, the late, great Gary Papa in Philadelphia. I interned under him. And what blew me away is this guy was in the business for 30 plus years. And after every show, he'd do a 2.5, 3 minute sportscast. After every show, he'd tape the competitors at the CBS and the NBC. He'd watch what they did. And then he would watch himself. Then he would rewind it, close his eyes, and listen to the whole broadcast because he was listening to his verbal cues. Then he would open his eyes, watch the broadcast with no volume, and he was watching his physical cues and how he's communicating with his body. He was a very active person, and I'm the same way. Like, So my first 3 to 5 years, I did that religiously. I would watch every single night. I would overanalyze. I'd close my eyes. I'd then turn the volume down. I did it 3 times. I would do it every single night. And I did that to the point where I was hurting myself because I was so self-critical. But I can tell you, I made leaps and bounds from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 because I was picking up small nuances, right? Now, I go back every now and then, or every time I feel like I'm kind of slumping, let me go back, or I'll go back and watch an old tape that I really like and say, what I do great there? Let me take something from that again. It's kind of like, guys, when you watch and you hear about NFL players studying tape, baseball players talk about, hey, I went and watched the film of where my elbow was and how my stance was and what changed, because you can pick up bad habits. And what worked on that last at bat with that pitcher back in June. Now I'm facing this pitcher again in September. That's the kind of concept that I kind of took out, from my mentor and then from athletes and put together. How do I keep things fresh? I'm always tweaking. Saturday night's a perfect example. We, I do the ABC college football pregame, postgame, and Phil shows leading up to other games. And I'm constantly finding a way to get better. Okay, I delivered this highlight this way. Next time on the show, what worked, what didn't work? How do I tweak this? How do I make this faster? How do I bring Mark Sanchez and Booger McFarland in more into this conversation? How do I make sure that I'm putting them in the right spot as that point guard and I'm delivering the passes to them, right? So I'm constantly in my head thinking about what can I do better? What can I bring to the broadcast that's going to be different? I've learned over time, less is more. Sometimes we try to jam, let's just say, 10 words into a sentence where sometimes 5 words would fit. And 5 words gives you the space to deliver it instead of feeling the pressure of saying all those 10 words in a sentence. And sometimes we've got to think in those terms that, hey, it's how you deliver the words, not so much all the words you're going to say. Make sure those words are filled with quality than a sentence that's all just a bunch of words of quantity. Because you're not going to, at a certain point now with me giving this answer, people are going to get tuned out because I'm just droning on and on and on. If I would have answered this effectively in a 45-second window opposed to a minute 30, I think you're going to get more quality. I'm using that as an example on my own self. So that's how you get better. And think about that the minute you think you've got a great show, I can tell you this too. You're never as good as you think. And the minute you think you're terrible, you're never as bad as you feel. So when you watch certain things back, you're going to be like, God, that didn't feel good. And you'll watch it and be like, oh, that wasn't that bad. What am I thinking? Or you'll watch a show and be like, that was a phenomenal show. And you'll put it on and be like, yeah, it was okay. Why did I feel so great about that? So sometimes our own head and getting out of our own head is kind of the challenge week in and week out when you process and try to get better.
Awesome. Kevin, do we have time for one more quick question?
Yeah, let's go. We got time.
Okay, who's got the last question? Who has it? Noah, I saw your hand first.
So obviously as a reporter, you're talking a lot, giving your opinion. But what happens if you're in the middle of a conversation or you have breaking news and you just can't think of what to say? And it's like they throw it to you and you've got nothing.
Wow. That is a challenge. I can tell you that there have been many times where I'm just like, find your way as I'm finding my way through this answer right now, right? You use an example, you think about if you're, for example, a reporter, use the setting of where you're at and a situation, take the viewer there. And if you kind of lost the perspective, then toss it back. Do not be in a position where you're droning on for a minute and you have no idea what you just said. Sometimes it goes back to the less is more. If it's sometimes you don't want to, the most important thing out of being a reporter is your credibility. You don't want to ruin your credibility by just saying stuff that isn't true, right? So sometimes it's just best to say, and that's all I got, back to you, instead of just going on and on and on. And then the next time somebody sees you, they're going to be like, I don't know if I really believe this person anymore, because you can't go back and take your credibility. Once it's gone, it's gone. And it takes a long time to earn it back. So I would keep all of that in mind, that If you're going to say something that's going to be compromising, do not compromise yourself. Tara, I got another one. Let's go.
One more. All right. Second, last, Cameron, go ahead. I can't speak. You can do it better than me. Go ahead.
So I remember like earlier in the talk you talked about finding your own style of being yourself, and I know for at least myself, I'm interested in a lot of different sides to broadcasting, like in finances and news and politics as well as sports. So what's the best way to find that what you're most interested in while also finding your own voice, and if that makes sense?
Like, are you saying you'd like air and doing something in finance, or do you want to do something in finance, nothing to do with TV?
No, like stock reporting and being on CNBC and stuff like that.
I would suggest trying all of them, or trying all of them at home. Or if you have somebody in your classes that you can go back and forth with and bounce and say, hey, do you mind shooting? One of my best friends in college, who's still one of my closest friends, we just got a videotape like camera, and we went out and basically did stand-ups all over the place, throughout the city, changing outfits and trying different things. And it was about, what are you comfortable doing this? Are you comfortable doing that? Why don't you just try it out? Rent the equipment that you can, or nowadays you guys just use an iPhone, like, and shoot yourself, or have somebody in your family shoot yourself, and then just watch CNBC for 30 minutes, take something out of there and say, I want to try this, and then try it at home and record yourself and do it every day. And if you like something like that, then do more. The whole point is that no one's expecting you guys to have an answer in college, but you better try and throw things on the wall to see you can get closer to your answer and what sticks, right? So I'm not expecting you to tell me this is what I want to do tomorrow. I'm really lucky that I knew I wanted to be on SportsCenter. I had to adjust by the time I was 25 and say, maybe I'm not going to be on SportsCenter. And eventually I found my way to SportsCenter. But many people just kind of go into something and then they change their. I've known reporters that have gone in and said, I want to be on Hard News, I want to be on Good Morning America, and within 3 years they're a health reporter at a local TV station because that's the thing that they liked. So I would say keep trying stuff. No one's expecting at 21, 22, 23 years old to say you should know what you're going to do. No, but if you have an idea and you want to keep trying it, explore that idea. You may not know it until you're 27, 28 in the business. I want to focus more on this as opposed to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. No problem.
Well, Kevin, thank you for your time. You can follow Kevin on social media, K Negandhi ESPN. If you go to his Twitter bio, I also would love a Wawa in Connecticut, Kevin.
Yeah.
Maybe we could go in on that together. I don't know.
We'd make a ton of money, let me tell you.
I know. I'm go down to the shore every summer. So Wawa holds a place in my heart. I think it is better than Cumberland Farms. Sorry for any other New Englanders in this call. But Kevin, in all seriousness, thank you so much for your time this evening. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I wanted to say, Tara, Wawa's better than Sheetz too, because that's a big debate in Pennsylvania. Tara, this is great that you set this up. Great questions by everybody here. I'm glad to do it. I just want to tell everybody here, understand that you are going to go through some tough times in this business. If you're prepared and understand that you can do a lot of things and sell yourself by saying, I can shoot that, I can edit that, I can do this, I can do that, and I'm available, more opportunities will come your way. If you go in and say, this is the only thing I want to do, you'll find out many news directors will say, well, I'm okay. I'm going to go to somebody that's more adjustable. You got to be flexible early on in your career and say yes to everything, and then find your way through it, because they're going to reward the people that want to be a part of the team.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin. I have a couple quick announcements for those who can stay for literally 2 seconds, but a round of applause for Kevin. Thank you so much.
Good luck, guys.
Awesome. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it.